Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want? For the next 24 minutes, we're going to design and attain your ideal life. On the Way to Wow Show. Together, we'll find the ideal path to get you back on the track to success and happiness. On the Way to Wow Show with your host, Kevin Bemmel.
If we're going to find our way to wow, we're going to be making a lot of choices. And that's right up the alley of one of our guests today, Barry Schwartz, who's going to talk to us about the paradox of choice, because he's very concerned about how this works with happiness. And then after that, we're going to talk to a woman who's really spent her life working with horses, first as a hobby and now professionally. Tremendous insight that we can get from these beautiful, graceful animals. But now we're going to go have a cocktail. Our guest bartender today is Will Cutting. Will has been in the hospitality business for over a decade, and he's currently the beverage services manager for two hotspots here in Los Angeles, the Friend and the Little Friend. There must be some story there, but I can't tell you what it is. He's also an award-winning mixologist, and he wrote a book, and I'm going to actually let Will, tell us about the book you wrote.
Excellent. Yeah, it's called The 21 Craft Cocktail Essentials. So I always had this theory. First, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. This is fantastic.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So the book is called 21 Craft Cocktail Essentials, and I always had this theory that if you know how to make a foundation of really good cocktails really well, the sky's the limit. You can go infinite numbers of directions and personality flares if you just have that solid foundation to build on. So I picked out my favorite cocktails, that are the 21 of those, and I detailed them all out in nice pictorial depictions and nice little explanations and tools and stuff like that. So it's anywhere from the expert, just making sure they have a solid foundation, to the novice, and hopefully bridging that gap between two professions, between people that just want to have a good cocktail and people that want to be making those quality cocktails for them.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll put the URL where people can download it in the show notes, okay?
That sounds great.
Great.
I love that.
So what are you going to mix up for us today?
Well, I know that we're going to have a great conversation with Jennifer talking about horses, and I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely.
So being that I've had a little bit of experience, my partner now actually teaches vaulting, so I get to be around horses a lot more than I ever did in my life, and it's really exciting. So the thing that always hits me is just that smell of sage in the air. Mm-hmm. So I made a cocktail for you guys this morning. Okay. And I played it all out in my head last night, and I R&D'd it this morning, and everything just sort of came together, and it was perfect. So it's called the Sagebrush Cocktail.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
So I'll go through the ingredients for you just a second. So it's got to have some fresh citrus. It's one of my favorite things, just that sage and citrus and cocktail. And it's going to be a vodka-based cocktail. Okay. And I've used a semi-sweet black tea syrup. Okay. Because I want to add some grit in there. If you've seen the people that work with horses, they've got grit.
Absolutely.
They've got some grit,
For
so
sure.
we needed a little
For
bit
sure.
of depth in that cocktail.
Okay.
And of course, we're going to put the sage right into it. We're going to shake it all up, and then we're going to finish it off with some of this lovely Covenant Blanc de Blanc.
So Coven is actually owned by some friends of mine, Jeff and Jody Morgan, and Jeff was he was actually a musician. He was performing on the Côte d'Azur in France, eventually became a wine writer, and then started his own winery. So this is his first sparkling wine, and fortunately he's a friend of mine, because this is the second year he released it, and it was sold out in about a week.
Incredible.
So it's really great stuff. Really fun stuff.
I love that. So great. I'm so excited to have this. I'm so excited to put it into the cocktail.
Yeah.
And let's go ahead and get that open just so we're ready at the very end. And I love that sound. Oh, yeah. Every time the cork pops, you just know it's ready to have fun.
Yeah, right. It's that sound of good times are ahead. Oop.
Yeah. Every time.
Oop.
Okay, for me, I like to go with kind of the cheaper ingredients first, so just in case I mess anything up. I haven't messed up the whole cocktail, so I'm starting off with some fresh lemon juice. And I'm making two cocktails, so I'm doubling up this recipe at the moment. So we're getting 1.5 ounces of fresh lemon juice. Okay. And then I'm going with my black tea syrup. It's semi-sweet, so by semi-sweet, instead of using equal parts of the black tea and sugar, I'm using 2 parts of black tea and 1 part sugar. Okay. So I want to get more of that grit flavor coming through.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 2 parts of that, yeah. Wow.
Well, yeah, because I'm doubling that up. So,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
for the 2 cocktails. So we're getting 1.5 ounces in each cocktail. And that. And then I'm going to put some sage in. I usually go about 5 to 7 leaves, or just a healthy pinch, so I'm kind of doubling that up again. And then lastly, the vodka. And we're getting 1.5 ounces of vodka as well.
Okay.
And, you know, as...
And it just a substantial vodka, right?
Right. I like a vodka. You know, I try to source as locally as possible whenever possible. But otherwise, I look for something that's got some good body, good legs to it. So when you swish it around the glass like a wine, it just kind of sticks to the sides.
Oh,
it's got
okay.
that good,
Got some
good,
viscosity to it.
Yeah, it's got legs that'll just keep running. So,
Sure.
For this one, because we are going to add the sparkling into it, I just want a very small amount of ice. I'm literally just using a few little bits because I just want to mix it and dilute it and chill it, but I don't want to over dilute it. So just a hair there. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
You got the Boston shaker there. Is that what it's called? I think.
Well, the Boston shaker's with glass. So this is just a tin on tin.
Oh, okay.
And I don't use the Boston shaker because I break glass.
See, that's why I could never understand that either. Is you go like this, and now you got cut hands and nothing to drink.
I had a bar manager once. I'm also putting 1.5 ounces of champagne in this. Okay. I'm adding it into the tin afterwards just to make sure it's diluted all the way through.
Oh, okay.
And not topping it off. Obviously, you don't want to put that in beforehand because it'll explode.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to measure that out again. And yeah, I had this manager once that came in and didn't really see eye to eye with each other. And he threw away all my tin on tin shakers and replaced them with Boston shakers. And I may have broken a few extra.
It was a learning opportunity for him, is really what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too stubborn on too many things, but that was kind of one of them.
Oh, you gotta love that.
Get a little there.
Kind of swish it around a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be okay because I'm gonna pour it back out through the strainer, and it'll just dilute. So I got a good little shake there, and then you get that lovely golden brown hue.
Oh yeah.
From the tea.
Just a little bit translucent.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Excellent. So, a cocktail, as long as it's, in addition to looking good, should also smell good. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the sage on top there.
And that brings out a little bit of the scent to sort of beat it like that?
Sure, it just wakes it up. You know, so it's like, I don't want it's almost dormant at this stage, but if you smell it from here, it's got a really nice scent to it.
Yeah.
But you just give it a couple little taps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
Major difference, right?
Yeah, major. That smells like it's outdoors. The first one was kind of like, I just got it from the store.
It's like, oh, that's good and familiar. And we lost the cage to the sparkling, but we'll be okay. It's already open. And then I'm rubbing some lemon oils around the cocktail as well. So I put it just a couple inches below it so it doesn't get on your lips, and then it also smells like lemony zesty through the entire experience. And then I'm just wafting the lightest and sweetest of the oils on top of the cocktail as well. So then you get a nice, lovely looking and smelling sagebrush cocktail.
Oh, beautiful.
Cheers.
Thank you, sir. I know Jennifer's going to love this.
Absolute pleasure.
So we'll mix this up for us. And, you know, it's got sage in it. Sage always makes me think of horses. So it should be good. Let's see.
Ooh, that's delicious.
Okay. Wow. Oh, sorry, I have another to say.
I get it.
I'll take all the flattery.
You're a genius.
Thank you so much. Well, in my limited experiences with horses, there's always tons of sagebrush around, so this cocktail made the most sense for me.
Yeah, right? I mean, all those old westerns from the 30s was the sagebrush of this, but that's my impression. Sagebrush and horses go together. My guest is Jennifer Granger. At the ripe old age of 12, Jennifer got her first horse. And I think it's, you know, really, it was the start of a lifelong love affair. I will confess, I love horses. Okay, I, you know, really believe, like Ronald Reagan said, the best thing for the inside of the man is the outside of a horse. And I think that's true for women as well. But the interesting thing is, in her earlier life, Jennifer was a corporate executive. She worked for the organization that eventually became Live Nation, promoting live concerts all over the world. I think Live Nation did, right? And then eventually she got into kind of a different end of that business. And then in 2008, just some changes in your life, and you decided to go into working with horses and people professionally. Maybe, I don't know, finally coming home. If that's, is that an accurate?
I would say, yeah, definitely came full circle. If you would have talked to 15-year-old me, I would have said, I'm going to be a horse trainer. This is, I loved it. And every time they'd give me an office, with a window, I would sit outside and daydream about riding. I'd kind of look out over the valley and go, oh, that could be a great trail over there. So.
Yeah. But all through your corporate career, you stayed involved with horses.
I did.
Yeah. One of the aspects of the 3 pillars of attainment is the idea that we need to be multifaceted in our lives to reach that way to wow. So how did being involved with horses while being a corporate executive help you craft your overall life?
Well, I mean, for me, it was just, when I was working in the corporate world, I did a lot of trail riding. I wasn't as involved in the showing in those years. And just being out in nature and just being with my horse. And, there's something really amazing that happens that your heart rate syncs up with your horse's heart rate. And it's all the stuff that science is telling us now, but our heart rates sync up. And just being out there, and, at the time I kept her out in Palos Verdes, and it's, this beautiful peninsula and overlooking the ocean. And, you're just so in nature, and the things I would see, I got to see, big, huge rattlesnakes, and, you're kind of walking by them and you're like, okay, just stay there. And the hawks, and I got to see pheasant and, red fox, and just all these amazing things. I got to see a cougar. I was out on the trail, and we came around a mountaintop, and there's a mountain lion coming at us, and, kind of saw us and stopped and turned and then went over the side. But, all these things that you just don't see because we could go so deep into nature and really experience that. So
it's you're in a very different environment, obviously, than the corporate world.
Yeah.
So how does being in that different environment, but with this other creature, right, a horse, where we were talking about this earlier, right? The horse responds to our state, right? So. Right. So on the one hand, when you're in the corporate world, we're negotiating with people or working with people, and they're responding to our state. The horse does too, and yet it's in a completely different environment. How do you think that dynamic helps us as people?
Well, when you're working with the horses, you can't think about anything else. I mean, if you just have to set your problems aside, and you have to focus, and you have to be in the moment, because they're in the moment. They don't think about past or future or anything like that. It's what we're doing right now. And they also, even though they're bigger than us and they weigh close to 1,000 pounds, they depend on us to keep them safe. We're predators, they're animals of prey. In the horse's mind, they just think they're, a bunny rabbit. And so, everyone laughs when I say that. But, they do. And so they depend on us, especially when we're out trail riding. We have to be very aware of our environment and aware of, what's going to affect our horse and how our horse is going to feel about it. We might look at it and go, well, it's just a kid riding by on a bicycle. And the horse goes, oh my God, it's going to eat me, So we have to think about that.
Is it reasonable to say that when we're working with a horse, we have to be more aware of the horse in some ways than we are about ourselves?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do we do that, do you think?
Well, you kind of go through phases. So when you're first learning, you're just learning the basics of your positioning and how to give the horse cues and things like that. So once you've gone through that, it opens up space in your mind to where you can become aware. The horses, they speak, they don't speak, they speak a silent language. It's all body language. So, if I'm out riding my horse, like the time we ran into the cougar out on the trail. So we're up riding in the mountains, up kind of the top, and the trail winds through, and we were downwind from the cougar. It's the only reason we saw it. So the horses knew that the cougar was there. And every time the trail would wind around the side of the mountaintop and we'd get hit by a blast of wind, the horses would raise their head up and they'd try to turn around. And my friend and I were like, these horses are normally so good. Like, what is going on? But the horses were telling us, and they knew, and thankfully we got to see it, because we were thinking, gosh, our horses are so bad. We were the ride before, we were patting ourselves on our back for how great we were doing with these horses. And then all of a sudden, they wanted to spin and go back home, and we're like, what is going on? And then we see it, and then it's like, oh, you guys were trying to tell us something and we weren't listening. That was our fault. We didn't protect you from that, So you go through those experiences with your horse, and you start to build a reservoir of trust. And they have to trust you, and you have to trust them. And, once we learn to speak their language, and once we learn that, okay, you're going to throw your head up, that means you're in alarm. So you're telling me, okay, I'm alarmed here, and maybe your heart rate is going up. So what can I do to help with that alarm? Can I identify what you're alarmed about? Is it, somebody riding by on a bike? Is it something that I don't know about? And I have to kind of go, okay, how can I help you through this?
So final question. A lot of what you're describing to me sounds like the way we ought to be relating to other people,
Absolutely.
Our family and such.
Yeah.
In general, do you find that people who are good with horses are better with people?
I don't know. A horse is easy to be good with. A person, I think that for people who have trouble letting themselves be vulnerable, it's much easier to be vulnerable with a horse. You can get hurt by humans, like emotionally hurt by humans.
Right.
And I think that horses give us that safe space if you're not maybe necessarily practiced in feeling emotions or being vulnerable. You can really learn to have that and practice that and get good at it with horses. And horses are so forgiving. And I don't know if we're forgiving. Sometimes I think we don't forgive ourselves, and that causes the problems.
It's true.
But I think as I get older, I do kind of think that way, that they do help us with our...
You can see why there are so many different programs that basically uses horses for therapy.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like they put your life in real perspective, Like, and I don't know if you have the same experience, but when I'm around a horse, like all of those worldly problems just get really, really small.
Absolutely. Yep, that's it. I mean, I have adults that they just come and see me once a week, and I always joke with them. I'm like, I'm the cheapest therapist you'll ever have.
Well, Jennifer, your insights were fascinating, and you have a thing for our collage, don't you?
I brought you a blue ribbon.
Wow,
so,
a blue ribbon.
I finally got one.
You get your very
best
own
in
blue
show
ribbon.
for the Way to Wow, right?
That's right.
Anywhere you want to put it, Jennifer,
Okay.
it's up to you.
We'll put it right up there.
There you go. Thank you
All right.
so much for coming and talking with us. Really was a tremendous pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
So my next guest is a particular treat for me because I have been an admirer of his work for quite a number of years now. Dr. Barry Schwartz, Emeritus Professor of Psychology at Swarthmore, and you're an adjunct professor at Haas School of Business at Berkeley now, is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I found out about Dr. Schwartz, Barry, is through a TED Talk he did quite a number of years ago about something called the paradox of choice. To date, 20 million people have seen this TED Talk, and I'm telling you, it is both a scream funny and it is also incredibly informative. And for me, it helped me to understand something that had bothered me for quite some time. And then I went and bought his book, The Paradox of Choice. So, Barry, thank you, first of all, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. So, kind of jumping right in, and people said, okay, so tell me, what is this whole paradox of choice about? I said, well, it starts out because, and correct me if I'm wrong, people tend to be either satisficers or maximizers. So would you tell us what those two points of view are, or two positions are, if you will?
Okay, let me just step back. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you. Let me step back, take one step back before I get into that distinction and explain what the, quote, paradox of choice is. We in Western democratic societies have essentially taken it for granted that freedom is good, that choice enhances freedom, so that choice is good. And the more choice people have, the more freedom they have, and therefore the more choice people have, the better off they are. We've taken it for granted, and the amount of choice people have in societies like ours have just exploded. And it is true that choice is good, but it isn't only good. And the paradox that I wrote about in the book is that when you give people too many options, instead of being liberated by all of this, they're paralyzed. They can't pull the trigger. And so you make them worse off, not better off. Now, there's by now a lot of empirical evidence that some point will be reached. Where it is different for different people and in different domains, where you just kind of start tearing your hair out of your head and going, please take this away. The work that my colleagues and I did that are kind of an enhancement of this is we ask ourselves whether this problem of too much choice is a problem for everyone. And our thinking was like this: if you're out to get the best, how many options do you need to look at before you make a choice? The answer is you need to look at all of them, because how else do you know what the best is? Now, that's not a problem when all you've got is Lees and Levi's, but it becomes a very big problem when there are 2,000 or 10,000 or 50,000 different kinds of genes to choose from. So people who are out to get the best, we call maximizers. Only the best will do. There's another set of people who we call satisficers, who are not looking for the best. They're looking for good enough. And you can have high standards about what good enough is or low standards. But whatever the standards are, as soon as you find something that meets those standards, you choose it and you stop looking. And so a maximizer needs to do what we call an exhaustive search, which in the modern world is an exhausting search. Mm-hmm. And the satisficer doesn't. The satisficer just looks at one option at a time, and as soon as he or she finds something that meets the standard, you say, that's it, and you don't worry about what you've left on the table. And so we've done a lot of work. We created a little scale that tries to distinguish these two categories of people. And what we find is, A, people do differ in this regard, and B, people who are maximizers tend to get better results and feel worse about the results they get. Interesting. You know, we did one study with college seniors looking for jobs. Maximizers got better jobs and felt much worse about the jobs they got.
Yeah, and so this points up to my next one. I think this is something that you wrestled with in your book. So if there's kind of a sweet spot, if you will, in terms of optimal number of choices, how do we restrict that choice? right? Because you've got, on the one hand, you could assign it to the government, or you could assign it to, I don't know, parents, or how do we wrestle with the need to restrict choices in order to increase happiness?
So there's no entity from on high that's going to limit the number of options that we have available. So it's sort of up to us to find ways to limit them. And in the pre-digital days, where you'd have to schlep from store to store, driving across town, you might impose limits on yourself. But now, where you basically can be sitting on your couch eating popcorn, why would you ever stop searching? And the result is that we are confronted with minimal cost to us with as many options as we want to look at. So it takes a lot. There is a sweet spot. We don't know what it is, or more accurately, it's almost certainly not the same for every person and every area of life. But we now know unequivocally that there can be too much of a good thing. And so if you're in the marketing side, you should ask, how many options can I offer people so that they will be invited by them rather than paralyzed? And there's going to be a number. And that number is almost certainly smaller than the marketers think it is. And as consumers, we can try to impose a certain amount of discipline on ourselves. I'm only going to go to 2 stores. I'm only going to look at 3 websites. I am never going to click the button on the website that says show all. That is the invitation down a rabbit hole that leaves you depressed and without a new toaster.
Unfortunately, our time is up. But I'm encouraged a little bit. I read an article just recently that CocaCola is cutting down the number of options it offers from, I think, something like 500 to maybe 400. So it still seems overwhelming to me. But perhaps we're going in the right direction as consumer products groups. It seems in general are looking to offer fewer options. So maybe there's hope for us yet. Barry, thank you.
But I think we're going to have to rely on ourselves more than we are on the marketers.
You know what? I suspect you're right, nonetheless, indeed. So we're going to have Sierra put up your thing to wrap things up here. Are you ready? Okay. Here we go. We have a copy of the cover of Barry's book, the Paradox of Choice. It's going to go right up here on the collage. Oh, and she's putting you front and center.
Make the choices easier, right?
There you go. Barry, thank you so much, and I hope we'll get an opportunity to check back in with you from time to time, and find out about some of the other work that you're doing as we work with people to make their lives better, take them on the way to wow. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
That's our show for this week. Stay tuned next week when we have Raphael Lappin, the founder of Lappin Negotiation Services, talking about how to deal with difficult people. Pretty timely subject, I think, right now. Courage at all time, my friends. Marie, you are still my belle.